Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and welcome to our taxi in and shutdown tutorials for the iniBuilds Airbus A350. We've just vacated the runway over here in Vienna and we can now run the after landing procedure. In the real world we'd keep the aircraft taxiing, we wouldn't stop beyond the runway, but in flight simulation, especially as you're still learning an aircraft, it may just be easier to do it this way. So the after landing procedure is initiated when the runway is vacated through the pilot flying by disarming the ground spoilers. The pilot flying then moves onto the lights panel and sets the lights like this, so the strobe goes back to auto once you've vacated the runway, the landing light off and the nose light into the taxi position. You then go down to the Ephis control panel and ensure that the weather radar is no longer selected, and you can also deselect the terrain at this point and select your ANF to a reasonable setting. When that's done, you can activate the taxi camera, which is currently not simulated on the A350, but at this point you would normally activate it in the real world. The pilot monitoring then is going to retract the flaps, then move up and start the APU and set the anti-ice as needed. Likewise also select the Ephis CP and select the ANF as applicable. Now that's the setup down there. When all of that is done, we can read the after landing checklist, which we'll find down here, and which is just skipped over. No, don't do that. Show me the after landing checklist, please. Here we go, all sensed items. That's why it's already completed it. But that's the after landing checklist complete then. Alright, so with that out of the way, during taxi in, there are a couple of things that we've got to take into consideration. Now, the first of them is the brake temperature. So, 300 degrees is the highest permissible brake temperature for takeoff. During a typical turnaround, your brakes are going to cool, so it's not that bad. But the brakes may easily get hotter than 300 degrees, and if they're approaching 500, that's where things start to get dangerous, where the fuse plugs might start melting. If you're getting into the region of 500, do use that brake fan. However, if you are not getting close, if you're remaining at around 300, maybe 400 degrees maximum, don't use the brake fan, because the brake fan invalidates some of the numbers and reduces the highest permissible temperature for takeoff down to 150 degrees. So that's something that you do want to take into consideration when you are taxiing in. Now, above 300 degrees, the Airbus might give you a brakes hot caution on your ECAM, and Airbus does say from that moment onwards you can use the brake fans without the need to think about brake oxidation. Brake oxidation basically means that the brakes do wear down if you blow cold air onto the very hot brakes. So by default, Airbus recommends to avoid using the brake fans until at least 5 minutes after landing. That's just something to take into consideration here. Now the next thing that we can think about is single engine taxi. That's actually commonly done on the Airbus A350, and you will see why. So 5 minutes after the engines have operated at high thrust, do note that reverse idle operation doesn't count towards that, and with the APU available, we can shut down either engine. Now I'm gonna shut down engine number 2 over here, and you will notice that the aircraft still maintains its speed very nicely, and it's very easy to control in single engine taxi. Basically, I don't need to do any rudder input, if at all a very, very small one, to keep it going straight. The only thing you got to think about is energy management during your turns. So you want to keep your N1 at or below 30%. That requires a little bit of planning here. So as we're about to enter the turn, I want to keep my speed up at 10 knots. I don't want to go much below that. So I'm braking as we're getting pretty close to the turn only. And here we go. And then let's make that right-hand turn like this. Our speed is already going down as we are in a turn right now, so I'm adding a little bit of thrust, bringing it up to that 30% and 1 here, so that we don't lose too much speed. Basically, if you do lose the speed, that's the big problem. And if you happen to stop the aircraft, well, then you've lost. Then you gotta restart that remaining engine or get yourself towed in. As you can see though, with 30% N1, we're at a rather high landing weight. The airplane does accelerate fairly nicely here. So everything is fairly easy with single engine taxi. You've just got to get the grip of it and always have energy management in mind. Keep the aircraft rolling at a good speed, as that is the most important thing that you can think about here. Now we're approaching our gate. I always check that the weather radar is indeed off before I'm turning into a gate, and then we are going to turn off the nose light as well. Remember your oversteering technique, which is absolutely necessary on the A350 in order to enter the gate. And here we go. Now, do use a little bit of engine thrust as you're turning into the gate to be sure to keep the aircraft moving. Have a good look outside. Use my tip to try to imagine that point where the aircraft is actually turning around and try to place that onto the center line. That's kind of how you can achieve the best possible result turning in a steep turn into the gate. So here we are, established on Foxtrot 5, aligning ourselves with the center line. Let's taxi all the way up to the most forward line, since we do have a rather long aircraft. Looks like the guidance system is inoperative, unfortunately, but here we go. And that's where we can stop our aircraft. Little graphics problem here, sorry for that. We will be straight back, and here we are again. Alright, and with that we've arrived on blocks. So let's set the park and brake. Then we are going to turn on APU bleed. And when APU bleed is on, then we can shut down the remaining engine. So, engine master off. And while the engine is running down, we ensure that the wing light switch is off. Then once the engines are at a level where they don't pose a danger to anyone anymore, basically below about 5% N1, we can switch the beacon light to off, and then we can switch the fasten seatbelt sign to off. Last but not least, we move up and we switch off the fuel pumps, and we do that right to left. That ensures that the standby pumps get turned off before the main pumps. Like this. Alright, and with that done, let's do the transponder, which we have down here on the surveillance page. So we go to transponder, mode, standby. It will ask us to confirm that, which we do. And then we can go for the parking checklist. And that's external lights, set, park and brake, or trucks, brake set, transponder, standby, and that's the parking checklist complete. Thank you very much for watching. That's your first flight in the iniBuilds Airbus A350 completed. Now, there are a couple more items that pilots have to do after we've arrived on blocks. That's checking your IRS performance, which you can do down here. If you go to the FMS, you go into data, and then you go on to, actually you go on a position, my mistake, position, and then monitor. And over here you can check your IRS performance. There is a table in the AFCOM that tells you exactly how much they can deviate from the target. Then next up, you have a look at the fuel page on the ECAM, and you ensure that fuel has been used evenly on both engines, and you ensure that the total fuel used together with the fuel on board still equals the fuel quantity you had when you started your pushback. So that way we can once again exclude any fuel leaks. Well, my friends, and that's it. Your first flight on the iniBuilds Airbus A350 completed. I surely had a blast recording this one. I hope that you liked it just as much as I did. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments underneath the video. I'm really looking forward to it. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.